Welcome to Right on the Mark with your host, Mark Young. Today I'd like to recall some of the cars that I had through the years. So you could kind of say podcast, carcast. As I begin this journey in my 50s, early 50s, I'd like to reflect on all of the cars that I drove through the years. I also would like to preview some of the upcoming cars that I might want to buy in the future. Probably near future anyway. But man, there were some cars that I had that I really loved, and there were some cars that I had that were just duds. And man, if I could remember all of that'd be great. But some of these cars that I had were given to me. Some of the cars I bought. And some of the cars that I'd like to say that we bought as a family. We had family cars. I had a car myself. Growing up in the 80s, I had, a couple cars. I had a car that was passed down to me from my grandfather, John. I remember it was a 1977 Chrysler Newport. I probably got that in the early 80s. I don't know, maybe 81, 82. But it was the first car that I could probably call my own. My grandfather sold it to me for $1. Can you believe that? $1. I guess that was a transfer fee that you had to do if you ever gave a car down or passed it down to a family member. But I welcomed it. Of course I did. Why wouldn't you take it? I mean, it was from what I remember, it was a 440 4-barrel V8, whatever you want to say about it. I mean, it was heavy. It ran like a tank. It was rear-wheel drive. I mean, it had the velvety seats in it. Really nice car. I can't remember the mileage that I had on it, but man, it was a big car. I could remember adjusting that seat and putting it all the way up because if I put it all the way back, I couldn't reach the pedals. So back then they made some big cars. I mean, the trunk in this thing is as big as some SUV trunks nowadays. That was the thing back then. They didn't have SUVs. 70s and 80s. They had station wagons and they had big cars. Other than that, they had pickups, but we never had a pickup. I never drove a pickup, for myself. But these cars with big trunks in it, man, was the thing because, you always wanted to go on vacation and put a lot of luggage in a trunk. So that was one thing that was a must, was a big trunk. And just for going to the grocery store, just for doing things around the house and taking families, you needed a big car because generally that's all you had was one car back then. If you had two cars, it was a luxury, but having one car was usually the norm back then. There was other cars that I had. After my Newport, ran out on me, I think I sold that to somebody actually in Charleroi. I remember passing it up as I used to go to Cal State College. I'd say, "Oh, there's my car." And it sat on the street for the longest time. I don't know how many years I drove by it on the way to school, but after I stopped going to school in the early 80s, I don't know what happened to the car, but I doubt if it's still running now. If it is, it'd be a classic. But there was other cars that were handed down to me. I mean, my Uncle Mikey gave me I think it was a 78 Pinto. It was my cousin Glenn's. The lovely Kim would always talk about it. She's like, there's a hole in the floor and I smell gasoline as would drive around Monessen. But I never took it too far because I knew it wouldn't last. It was always on its last leg. But hey, another hand-me-down, why not? A lot of people used to see me around in this green Pinto. And I think it was just two doors with a small back seat. But back in the 70s, I think that was really big. Pintos were huge back then. I don't even know who made them. Maybe it was Ford or Chrysler. I'm not really sure. But they're not. I don't think they're around these days. But the green Hornet is what I remember it used to be called for my cousin Glenn when he gave it to me. But my Uncle Mikey always loved seeing me around driving it because it was part of his family. And, Monessen was a tight-knit community. So you always saw the same people driving around every day. So every time he saw that, he'd beep and wave. And I always thanked my Uncle Mikey for that. It was great. That didn't last that long, but man, it sure was a blast to drive. I'll say that. There's other cars growing up that I had. One of my favorite cars was probably the 1982 powder blue Chevy Camaro I had. Oh man, was she a beaut. Had that for a few years. I had a few problems with that car. I Had some, I think I had some transmission problems. I remember a buddy of mine, Rick Klein, put some louvers on it for me back in the day. A good friend of my mom, Donna Klein, her husband worked, I think at Rotolo's Dodge or Rotolo Ford in Charlotte, and helped me put louvers on it. So that was kind of fun. I dressed it up and I put new hubcaps on it. Yeah, that's right, hubcaps. That's what I put on. I picked them out of like a J.C. Penney catalog and put those on. But yeah, I don't think it had nice wheels, but I try to dress it up a little bit. But it was a small car, and it wasn't very practical. But the insurance was high on it, and I think I just got rid of it after a while. But after that, there's other cars I had that. One car I remember back in the mid '80s was a Dodge Shadow. Might have been late '80s, but I bought it as a demo. It had about 5,000 miles on it, and I really liked that car. It had nice interior. It looked really sleek, kind of new. Really nice. And I remember bringing it up to my then girlfriend's house, the lovely Kim. She was having a cookout, and her brother Tommy Joe actually came and looked at it, and I was showing him my new Dodge Shadow, '87 Dodge Shadow, and I was explaining to Tommy Joe about what it was all about, and I told him I bought it as a demo, and he's like, "Oh, a demo." Well, that's really good because the first 5,000 miles, you figure it works out all its kinks and it's still in the garage and they fix it. So you got it right at its peak. So I'll never forget that Tommy Joe said buying a demo is good because the first 5,000 miles, they break it in. And if something happens, they figure it out by the time you buy it. So it was a good car for me. I had that for quite a few years. I mean, there was other cars that I had after that. There was... I drove my mom's '79 Buick Regal for a while. I mean, that thing lasted for years and years, probably 10 years. I remember driving that when I first got married to the lovely Kim, in the late '80s. There was other cars that I had. I mean, I had a Dodge Stratus, which was pretty cool. I want to say that was in the early 2000s. I really liked that car. Really liked it. It was powder blue as well. Not quite powder blue, but like it was one of those Dodge pretty blue cars that I really liked. It was really sleek and it was brand new and it was 2002. I liked Dodges for a while, and then I got a kick on a Mazda. My brother Mike always bought Mazdas. He bought a couple of them, and he's like, "Oh, these things last forever. They hardly have any maintenance, and you should check it out." So I remember the lovely Kim buying the first Mazda in the family, and I believe that was in '92 when we had our first child, Sean. It was pretty nice. We had a cool deal. We bought it at Airport Mazda. And it was beige, and the interior was kind of pinkish beige, and it was kind of neat, but we got a really good deal on it, and I really liked it. So a couple years later, I bought one. Not as fancy as hers, but I downgraded a little bit and got the base model Mazda because, it just fit my needs back then. We didn't really need two fully loaded cars at the time. Kim could have the fully loaded car and I could just have the base model, but it lasted forever, man. If I didn't get bored with it or if I didn't trade it in or just because I was outgrowing it or because I didn't want to take care of it or for whatever reason, you could probably have those cars for 20 years. I mean, we bought Mazdas for years and years and years just because of the convenience. I knew how they rode. I knew the maintenance on it. I knew everything about the Mazda. So it wasn't a problem buying one. In fact, there was one I bought that I don't even think I test drove. I just picked out the color and drove off the lot. That's always fun when you know a car that well that you could just pick the color and the brand in whatever trim level you want and drive it off the lot. That just became a staple at our house is a Mazda. After that, I bought probably I think it was 2015, I bought a Acura TLX, first year model. I know just the general rule of thumb is don't buy a first year model of any car, but I was really had my sights set on a car that I could drive and rely on that was a little more upscale. I had a little bit better job at the time, and I thought that, hey, this is the most powerful four-cylinder car that I could buy that is very reliable. I mean, an Acura is a upscale Honda, and you know how the legendary Honda, they last forever, as the legend goes. But, Acura is probably the better bang for your buck just because it had a very powerful 4-cylinder car. I didn't really want to get into a 6-cylinder car just because of, all the miles I was going to put on it. But, I got into that. I'm still driving a Acura TLX at the time. The only thing I'm disappointed in is it's a little smaller than what I'm used to. The Mazdas, the 6 Mazda is what I specifically wanted to say, is a little bit bigger, and I had more room in there. I mean, one of the things that you can measure a car is by putting takeout in the back seat. If it fits on the floor, you have a full-size car. So all my Mazdas fit takeout on the back floor without adjusting the seat. The Acura I have now can't do that. You have to put the seat pretty far up to sit the bag back there. So it sometimes does go on the seat, which I don't really recommend putting food on a seat. I always like to put it on the bottom, on the footwell. But if you had to, I put it on the seat just because it's a little bit smaller than the Mazda. The car that I'd like to review or preview is the RLX, the Acura RLX, which is it's a full-size car from the TLX that I have. I really like to get the full-size car, and I think my next one is going to be an RLX if I don't buy a SUV. But it has the full-size cabin in back where you're going to have plenty of room for people to sit in the back, and you have plenty of room up front as well. There's a couple different models out there that you could choose from. I mean, they have hybrids now. They have one where they have 2 motors in the back because it kicks in to hybrid mode. It kicks into I want to say battery mode instead of gas mode. So you have 2 battery powers back on the rear wheels, and generally uses that to drive. When you kick into gas, I think it goes to the front wheel. They have the all-wheel drive system as well. So, ideally, if I was going to buy a car and money was no object, I would definitely go for the Acura RLX. Simply because, the hybrid model as well, simply because it has, the all-wheel drive. It has all the bells and whistles. It's the mid-size car. It's actually the biggest car they make. It's actually their flagship car. Where it has plenty of trunk space, plenty of backseat space. Some of the negatives on that car is you can't put the back seat down just because of the 2 hybrid motors that sit on the rear wheels. That might become a pain if I ever want to try to put some long 2x4s in the back. So that's one thing that it doesn't have. But there's other upgrades coming down the pike. From what I understand, they're going to have Apple CarPlay, Android Auto. They're going to have some upscale I want to say, I guess software you can call it. So they have, the software upgrade where your navigation system works a little faster. Your interface works a little faster. The radio stations work faster. Even the heated seats and cooled seats, are going to be pretty much standard going forward. And I think those are going to be on the 2020 model from what I hear. 2019 is... the RLX models are out now, but they're not to where I would like to buy one because it is still missing a few pieces that I think that I need is the job that I have in driving. So I think I'm going to just currently stick with my 2015 TLX and see where it takes me. Right now I have about 30,000 miles on it. It's about 3 years old. It'll be 3 years old next week, as a matter of fact. I bought it right at the year-end sale. I could remember going to Spitzer Acura at the end of the year. I want to say a couple days before New Year's Eve. I went in with the price. I did all my research, and this is the price that I wanted to pay for it. I'm not going any higher than this price. I'm thinking they got to sell it to me. Everything that I hear is the best price to get is at the end of the year. And the 2016s at the time were already out, but the 2016s were unchanged. There was no change on it. So if I bought a 2015 or a 2016, nobody's going to know because it's the exact same car. So why would I pay more for the exact same car just to get a 2016 model? The salesman Jeremy's like, yeah, I haven't found a buyer yet that wants to pay more for the same car. So, I'm like, yeah, so I'll just buy the year-end model. And there was one left, and I didn't really go in to saying I want to buy this certain type. I researched it online. I went in and I found this car, and I'm like, well, I want to pay this amount for it. So it all turns out that the price that they gave me came under the amount that I was willing to pay. So what's not to like? I ended up buying it then, and I'm happy I did because, man, did I get a deal. The best time to buy a car is for sure the end of the year. There's part of me that wish I would have held out a couple more years just because every year they upgrade a car. But if you keep waiting for them to upgrade a car, you'll never get it. You'll never end up buying a car because you just keep waiting for the next year to come out. So, I took the 2015 TLX, and it has done me good. It rides well. The transmission's a little shifty. It's kind of awkward just simply because it's the first year model on it, and I don't think they perfected it. But from what I hear now, they have perfected it 4 years later. So the shifting is probably a lot smoother than the one I have. There's a couple sport modes you could put it in. You could put it in sport, regular sport, sport plus. You can put it in normal, econ mode. I usually put it in normal mode because just if I put it in sport or sport plus, you just, start out way too fast at a red light or a stop sign. So I kind of put it in normal mode. And the car I have now is front wheel drive. I'm probably due to get some tires too within the next few months just because of all the traveling I'm doing. But, I did have to put a battery in it. I didn't realize it has I didn't realize all the battery juice that it uses. I mean, I got a lot of power in that car. There's basically almost everything is power in it. And plus I have what you would call two interface screens. So one of my screens is a Navi screen, and the other screen is for, radios or for iPods if you wanted to hook up or, any type of Google Play, something like that. So I didn't realize all the bells and whistles that I had put such a drain on the battery. So I did have to get a battery a few weeks ago. We ended up stranded at Giant Eagle, as a matter of fact. I almost had to call an Uber to get home. But there's a couple college kids that came from Penn State, and they saw me with my hood up, and they're like, hey, do you need a jump? I'm like, absolutely. So, the lovely Kim was with me. I wouldn't want to leave her stranded anywhere. So, keeping her safe is job one. So I'm like, yeah, if I could take a jump from you just to get it back home and to recharge it, I think that'll be good. So that's exactly what happened is they jumped my car, helped me jump the car, got back home. And then the next day I went and got a battery down in Advance. So I got one of the better batteries too. So this battery should be able to hold a full charge for a couple more years with all the bells and whistles that I have on that car. So that is good to know. But for the most part, I think I'm pretty happy with those cars. I'm trying to think if there's any other cars that I might have missed through the years that I've had. I had the Chryslers, I've had the Dodges, whatever the Pinto, whoever made the Pinto, might have been Ford. I had the Buick Regal that my mom had. I could remember the lovely Kim buying a 2000 Dodge Grand Caravan, and I thought that was pretty cool just to get a year of 2000. We bought the upscale. I think it was probably the sport model is what I'm thinking. I mean, it had one of those video players in the roof where you would pop it down for the kids. So on long trips, they could watch a movie. But it turned out even on short trips, we watched a movie. So that car was really fun to drive. I know it was a minivan, but hey, it served its purpose. I want to say we had that a good 7 years at least, 7-8 years. Always like to have a car past the 5-year mark just because I like to get my money's worth out of it. If I have it any less than that, I feel like I don't get my money's worth, but it's always one of those balancing act where you get it year 3 and it's like, well, you probably need tires and you're probably going to need brakes within the next year. So you're thinking tires and brakes could be anywhere from $1,000 to $2,000 depending what size tires you have. So I'm always on the fence with, should I buy a new car at year 3, or should I just invest anywhere from $1,000 to $2,000 into it and just keep on trucking? There's been a few times where I didn't want to put the $2,000 into it, and I just bought a new car and just traded that in. So that works out as well. This car, I'm still on the fence as we speak right now because I'm at year 3 and it's going to need brakes and tires. So we shall see what I'll do. I'll have to update you at a later time. But, a lot of maintenance goes into these cars as well. My Acura doesn't need a lot of maintenance, but all the cars in the past have. I mean, these are oil changes now. They all use synthetic oil, and you really don't need an oil change but once a year, really. I mean, the lovely Kim has a Land Rover Discovery. So, man, those Land Rovers, you only need to change oil once a year. Just like my Acura, I need to change oil once a year. Maybe twice a year if you put a ton of miles on it. But, I'm at almost 30,000 miles at 3 years. That's not too bad, averaging about 10 a year. It's really not bad at all. I mean, I know people that put on 30,000 miles a year. So I know Acuras will last and last and last. Like I said, they're an upscale Honda, so you're getting a quality product. You see a lot of them on the road. There's a Spitzer right up the road here, and whenever they put a new dealership in, you always see a lot of cars that are bought from that dealership. Actually, there's going to be a Bobby Rahal 19 that they're going to put in. I think they're going to specialize in Range Rovers, Land Rovers, and Jaguars. Basically, they're all from the same company. I looked at a couple Jaguars whenever the lovely Kim bought her Land Rover. But I'm not sure I'm ready for a Jag yet. They just don't build them like they used to. Whenever I was looking at them, and I'm like, nah, Jag just isn't where I want to be. But there's a lot of cars through the years. Can't really remember of any other ones that I've had or might have test drove. Test drove a lot of cars back in the day whenever I was growing up, because you always want to just get a feel for what you like. But Mazda was such a staple in our family for a long time. And before that, we dabbled in the Chryslers, the Dodges, and I think we had a Chevy Camaro at the time, but they just don't seem to last. The longevities on the imports, I hate to say it, but the Mazdas treated us well. Of course, the Acuras did, and so forth. But the Dodges and Chryslers, we kind of got away from. I know my oldest son, Sean, has a nice Ford. He has the Ford 250, which is super nice. He has like all the bells and whistles. In fact, I was just looking up online. There's one. I want to say it was at Rotolo Ford. Maybe it was or Washington Ford. One of those. Brand new 2019, all the bells and whistles, and it's the Ford F250 series. You don't want to get into the 350 series because the King Ranch, then you get the dually wheels. If you get the King Ranch in a 250, you just get the regular wheels and back. You don't get the dualies, as they call it. But man, those the Ford trucks, is what I understand, is top of the line, and it's the best, and I think it is the most selling truck in America, pretty much. Sean did have a Dodge at one time. He had a Dodge Ram 1500, which I thought was nice, but and he did a really nice job of decking it out and stuff like that, and he put a lot of money into it. But for some reason, him and his friends just got on a kick for Fords. Probably when Sean got on a pipeline, he saw a lot of Fords, and he probably is like, yeah, let me just hang with my guys that have the Ford 250. So at one point, I think he had a GMC, which I thought was really nice. I forget the name of the GMC truck that he had, but man, it was really tricked out, souped up, and I thought that was a truck that he was going to have for a long, long time. But no, he only had it for a few years. Of course, this F250 that he has now is only a couple years old, but man, it is beautiful. It's a nice red truck, and man, I'll tell you what, pipelining does good. Pipelining work does good for everyone on there because they're doing well. They're buying upscale trucks, and you have to. I mean, you need a truck to get you to work. It's not like you got a regular job that you could pull into a driveway and go to work. No, you got to drive to the job site, and sometimes you just gotta. Everybody just rides together to the well. Wherever they're digging out in the field, if they're digging out deep in the woods, you need something to get you there. And I'm pretty sure the Ford King Ranch 250 will get you there in style. Oh, no doubt. But that's about it, folks. That's about it for Cars Through the Years. A little preview of some cars that I know of. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. As always, I invite you to leave a comment, tap the bell, subscribe, and do all that. That's about it for Right on the Mark. See you next time, folks. Take care.